Welcome back to the GSMC Sports Podcast, brought to you by the GSMC Sports Network. We are heading into our final segment of the day, talking about the NBA considering to make some changes in order to help the defense. Now, this has been a storyline around the league. Specifically, it started popping up around the time that we saw some of these historic individual offensive performances, such as Joel Embiid and Karl Anthony Towns, both scoring over 60 points in the same night. And then just a few days later, Luka Doncic scoring 70 against the Hawks to join Embiid in the 70-point club. And it's been no secret that year after year, we have seen the offenses get, exceptionally better. We're seeing all-time high offensive efficiencies year after year. The league has broken the offensive efficiency record in 6 of the last 8 seasons. There are some interesting numbers if you go back and look at that 2016-17 Warriors team and for how much of a juggernaut they were. If you would put them in today's NBA, they would be outside of the top 10, I believe it is, with offensive efficiencies in the league. So all of it is just, it's been crazy, and it's led to a lot of different people spouting off different takes. A lot of people are complaining about the lack of defense in the NBA. I personally don't see it that way. I don't think it's for a lack of effort, but I think that there are a handful of things. First being, I think that the league is at an all-time high in terms of talent, specifically on the offensive end, that there's just not much you can do. You can play perfect defense on a Luka Doncic, on a Steph Curry, but if they are feeling themselves, they're going to hit the shot, and there's just not much you can do about it at all. So I think that's a factor. I think that additionally, we saw the getting rid of hand checking, which is, of course, another a little bit of a volatile topic in terms of the NBA, where a lot of people feel like it needs to come back. A lot of people are saying it doesn't actually have that much of a factor on the game. I don't know if it's specifically the hand checking, but specifically we see game in, game out. If you watch an NBA game, you will see an NBA player with the ball drive into the lane and do the lowering the shoulder a little bit and then go flying off of the defender, flail a little bit, and get the foul call. The NBA refs support these calls, saying it's by the rules, and that a lot of the time, because of the defender's position, they're putting themselves in a compromising position, and for that reason, it should be a foul. But I feel like for the most part, we as NBA fans, at least myself, I actually don't want to speak for everyone in this one, but if you are an offensive player initiating the contact, I just don't think that it should really be a foul. I think that now there's a handful of players that the way that the rules are put out there, there's a lot of guys that are very talented at working their way through these rules. James Harden has been a revolutionary in that sense, the way that he has been able to put defenses in compromising positions and take advantage of it. Trae Young, Jalen Brunson, Luka Doncic, these are all guys that are great at it. But, I think that there's just, it feels a little dirty, and not dirty in like an unfair, harmful way. It feels stupid, because that's why a lot of these times with the defenders, it's not for a lack of effort, but there's almost this bubble that a lot of NBA players that are skilled enough on offense have. Joel Embiid's an example of this too, where if you press up anywhere too close to them, they're going to find a way to manipulate the refs in order to get the foul call. And as a result, we see defenders just playing so far back, not daring to come anywhere near to touching the offensive player, that it allows along with how much three-point shooting there is and the amount of spacing there is in the NBA, then it opens up the lanes more and more, because when a player is driving, you can't actively put yourself onto the players quite as much. And all of this sort of bakes into this issue. There are a handful of other reasons that I haven't even mentioned yet. And there's a ton of different ways to sort of analyze this whole problem issue, if you want to call it that way, because it's also interesting. The NBA does better ratings-wise when there is offense. We saw Chauncey Billups had some interesting comments being asked about this question. He referenced the 2005 finals, I think it was. It was that or 2004, where it was that, I believe it was the Spurs and Pistons finals, where it was just a defensive rock fight, and the ratings for that finals were very low. The NBA benefits a lot from offense because it allows them to put out the social media clips. It impresses the casual viewer more, and it impresses me too. I'm not trying to call anybody who likes offense a casual when it comes to it. It's definitely eye-popping, but I think that there is also a certain level of interest you have to personally have to be extremely impressed with defensive plays, because the highlights aren't necessarily quite as eye-popping as the offensive highlights. So the league has definitely benefited from this offensive revolution over the past handful of years, but the question is, has it gone too far? And that's something that the NBA themselves are looking into. Joe Dumars, who is a Pistons legend, NBA legend in my eyes, he is the current head of basketball operations for the league, and he told people at ESPN that the league is currently looking into whether or not changes need to be put in place in order to counteract the offense and find more of a competitive balance between offense and defense. Now, what exactly this means is still something that they are going to be discussing for the next handful of months. This is if a change is going to be made. It won't be made until this summer, but it is an interesting thought experiment here in terms of what can be done. Because again, I think that the flat out fact is that offensive players and their skills have never been at this level in NBA history. So you can't take the skill away from the offensive player, and we shouldn't want to. But it's what can we do to allow defenses to counteract that a little bit more. A very popular idea has been the idea of outruling the 3-second violation on defense. I forget exactly who it was. It might have been JJ Redick that put this in a historical perspective. So whoever it is, credit to you. But the history of the defensive 3-second was in order to create more spacing, because back in the day, it was everyone sort of packed into the paint. You had a couple big guys on opposite blocks, and it was a very crowded game. This, in turn, had guys forced to sort of open up the painted area and be able to allow offensive players to get to the rim with a little bit more ease. Now we're at a point where, because the spacing is as advanced as it is, and all these rules are put in place where you can't be quite as physical with them on the perimeter, or even as they're driving in, we see a lot more open layups, stuff like that, that is leading to a lot of these possessions that people criticize for a lack of effort on the defensive end by the players, when it goes a little bit deeper than that. So the idea of outruling this 3-second violation has been a very popular idea because of the fact that then, of course there still is the spacing. This would be on the defense's terms to implement. Well, how much do we just want to have a guy camping out in the paint? But because of the perimeter, but it allows an opportunity for the defense to have the upper edge when it comes to guarding the paint. And I know that there's also probably a portion of NBA fans that think that we are too much in an era where players are just throwing up three-pointers, which is, partially true to some degree because of the shot making, but I don't think that we would fully get to a point where if you eliminate the 3-second violation that we're only going to see three-pointers. I think that, again, you can hurt players. We see Rudy Gobert getting pulled out onto the perimeter anyways because of the fact that when you play teams where everybody can shoot, you can't afford to leave anybody open. And, I think that this would be at the caution of the defense to have somebody camped out in the paint, but it is also something that could sort of, mend the gap a little bit. Now, my biggest change I would like to see is this whole idea of who is initiating the contact is getting called for the foul. Because it's one thing when an offensive player is driving. I think, you can allow contact for sure, but I just feel like, and it's not even like the overall free throw numbers in the NBA have increased, like, as a whole, because instead we're just seeing, I feel like, a lot of defenders not even make the contact and allowing easier buckets at the rim. So, there's, again, a ton that goes into this, and it's a very interesting debate, and I'm not sure what the immediate fix is, but I at least do like the fact that the NBA is trying to work this out. I personally am a big fan of defenses. I think that finding the schemes and everything is a very, very appealing, draw to me, but it's hard to do so the way that offense is played in the NBA and with the, again, amount of talent that is across the league. So this is something that, again, there's going to be no immediate action, but I think that if you also look at some of the Olympic and some of the FIBA rules, they do a lot less of the, defensive restrictions that in turn is part of the reason why we see American teams struggle a little bit more when they go overseas, because there are certain things that are allowed over there that are not in the NBA. And I would definitely, if I'm Dumars, if I'm on this committee looking to, balance things out, I would definitely take a look into some of the international rules as well. But on that note, that is all we have time for today. Thank you very much for tuning in to the GSMC Sports Podcast. Thank you to the GSMC Sports Network for allowing us to host this show. Just a reminder to like and follow wherever you may be catching us, and we will be back tomorrow at 2 o'clock, so we will see you then. Let's go. I wake up to a little bit of drool on my pillow, feel like it's gonna be a bad day. Yeah, I'm tired of shit, and the coffee ain't hit yet, damn, ain't that great. Nice.